So we've talked about a ton of different console revisions here on the channel, but there was one I wanted to cover here, specifically with Sony, because we talked about a couple of different Sony revisions with the PS3 and even the original PlayStation. However, their most impressive revision, I think, has been the PlayStation 2. It released in 2000, but 4 years later, in 2004, they managed to take this form factor for the PS2 and shrink it down to something that's about the size of two PlayStation 2 game cases. And today, I wanted to go through both of these systems and show you how they did it. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel. Now, I did get both of these off of eBay. They had mentioned that there were some things wrong with them. Typically, with the PS2, the PS2 Slim, it will come back to things like the disk drive either not opening or not reading. So I figure this will give us a good way to kind of break them down and compare them side by side, which is a good way to start things here, just putting them legitimately side by side, because the difference is so obvious, and what Sony was able to do here with the larger PS2 going to the PS2 Slim was impressive then, because at the time, the PS2 was seen as a powerful system. When it came out in 2000, there were even rumors going around that the system was being bought and hoarded by other governments, I believe, and countries to use for missile defense systems. And, I mean, a lot of us, I'm sure at the time, were looking at this rumor online and hearing it on, like, playgrounds at school and stuff. We're like, that's probably not true. But then we'd see games like Metal Gear Solid 2 and Final Fantasy X, and we'd be like, oh, maybe someone should look into that. Now, in order to shrink the PS2 down to the Slim, there were some things that had to change and even be outright removed. For example, the expansion bay on the original PlayStation 2 was completely eliminated. And I'm sure Sony was looking at data to back this up, and they realized, okay, not many people are really installing a 3.5-inch IDE drive into these PS2 systems, kind of like we were thinking when we first made the system. So we're going to go ahead and eliminate that, and it was mostly used for things like Final Fantasy XI at the time. However, while they did remove the expansion bay, they did add an Ethernet port for network, which was a nice addition because otherwise we had to buy the network adapter for the older PS2 model, which gave us access to that hard drive bay as well as an Ethernet LAN port on the back. So it was at least something that Sony did to make the PS2 Slim more relevant, I would say, in 2004, and you didn't need that optional piece to get it. Now, the other thing they did was they had to remove the power supply from inside the system and package in one of these bricks. Now, later on in the Slim's life, they did work to put the power supply back in the system, which was nice, because then we just have a typical plug and then you just run it to the wall. You didn't have to have this brick that you would try to hide behind your entertainment center or something, and these had their own problems, which is why Sony worked to reinstall the power supply in these Slim systems later on. There were like 19 different revisions of the PS2, and the Slim itself had almost half of those. But the most obvious change that a lot of people probably remember this system for was that they went to kind of this flip-top design. Technically, they worked backwards to what they had with the original PlayStation and the PS1, as that had a door that would just kind of open up on a hinge, and it worked. I guess the issue we had here was that the disk drive itself took up a lot of space and was at times unreliable. Sure, there's like an entire spring here, but really, as long as you get the door open, it was fine. Even if that spring was completely missing, you could press the button, open this up, put the disc in, and then make sure it was shut. As long as the sensors were pressed down, it would still play the game. All right, with the comparisons out of the way, we're going to go ahead and open both of these up here, and they have plastics kind of around the bottom, just covering up different Phillips head screws. Also, you know what? I'm curious if you preferred one over the other. Like, did you grow up with the older model and then upgrade to the Slim and like that one more, or did you like the older model more? I do know that the modding community much more prefers the fat model because of that hard drive space in the back and all of this. And I think the Slim models, depending on which one you got, has issues with some of the soft modding programs. But I'm curious, the general consensus, do people prefer the fat model or the Slim model? Okay, so all the screws out. The lid comes off of our PS2 Slim here. That's not bad. Like, coming off of eBay, that looks pretty good inside. I'm used to a ton of dust bunnies and all kinds of junk in there. The PS2 fat model also doesn't look too bad overall. There's our initial look. Now, you can see immediately difference in heat sinks, right? We have a couple of large heat sinks here, and this one heat sink in this PS2 Slim, some Something to keep in mind with the two systems and the way Sony had the cooling setup, however, is we do have a more, I would say, direct kind of airflow here for the Slim model, where they were looking to push air through the heatsink and out of the back, whereas on this side, Sony set it up more of a pulling motion, and it was pretty much just like, hey, let's pull all the air we can out of the back. It wasn't as directed as we have here with our Slim, where the fan is like legitimately right up against the heatsink. Now, both systems did work to kind of make its own little tunnel almost for the air. This used the top part here in order to do so, where it would basically just make contact with the metal and then just kind of push out. Whereas this one already had it set up and would just use the plastic